So let's talk about cells. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's inside of a cell and what's the different types of cells that we have in life. So we're going to ask you a simple question. What do you think are the characteristics of life? What things does a living thing do that non-living things do not do? Well, one thing is that they reproduce, right? They grow. They can repair themselves. Those are kind of the, you can come up with several others. Any one of that you can come up with, a single cell has the ability to do that. And that gives you a definition of what is the basic unit of life, being a cell. Well, cells can come in different sizes. Ostrich eggs, bacteria, mitochondria are within a cell, but you can actually see those with a light microscope. So from here to right about here, those are things you can actually see with a light microscope. You can also see some of those things with your human eye. Plant cells, animal cells are about the same size, between 10 micrometers and 100 micrometers. Now, there are two different kinds of cells, prokaryotes and eukaryotes. Prokaryotes do not have a nucleus. These are the simpler forms of life. Bacteria are prokaryotes. All other kinds of cells are actually eukaryotes. So fungi, an amoeba is a base one cell organism, but is a eukaryote. Also, eukaryotes have membranes around their organelles within the cell. They're larger, and the examples are provided for you here. Now, if you look at the tree of life, prokaryotes are bacteria and archaea. Those are the things that give you the different colors around the mud pots in Yellowstone National Park. Basically, it has a cell with a membrane around it. It can have a cell wall. It can have a capsule on the outside of that cell wall, and they move by things called pili. They have structures inside called ribosomes, and they have their DNA molecule. They also have other things within there. Now you can see here they are quite small, so you have to actually have a microscope to be able to see them. If you look at a eukaryote, it has membrane around its organelles. It has the stylized nucleus, and that is it's larger in size. So that's what a eukaryote cell. A typical animal cell has all of these components. I'm not going to go over every one of them right now because we're going to cover them in a little bit. But things that are only found in animals are animal cells or centrosomes. Now, if you look at a plant cell, it has a lot of the same stuff that animal cells have, but they have a cell wall. Gives it that structure of a tree. It has a central vacuole, which is the storage area for water and air. It has plasmodesmata. Those are areas that cells, openings between plant cells that allow the plant cell to actually talk to each other or exchange information. And they have chloroplast, the area where light is converted into sugar molecules. So both animal and plant cells have a plasma membrane. This is a lipid bilayer. Two layers of lipids. Notice that the hydrophilic points out and the hydrophobic areas are internal. Notice also there are protein channels or proteins that will go all the way across a membrane. They also have glycolipids. These are lipids and carbohydrates that attach to the outside and we'll get to a little bit about what those are. Also, they are attached to the cell by these cytoskeleton filaments. Plasma membrane, we're going to go into a lot more detail, but they're present in both plants and animals. And it provides a selective permeable barrier to make sure that bad stuff doesn't get into the cell and the contents of the cell don't escape. Well, the information control of a cell is the nucleus. That's where the DNA is at. The DNA has protein around it, and those structures are chromosomes, chromatin, and nucleolus. You're going to actually need to know what those things are. It is a double membrane. Notice it has one internal membrane here, and it also has an extension of that membrane that goes out and forms this rather non-structured, what is called an endoplasmic reticulum, this area out here. On that endoplasmic reticulum are things called ribosomes. Ribosomes are where you get protein synthesized. And they're composed of RNA, ribosomal RNA, and protein. These are, and we'll get to this when we start talking about how proteins are made, but ribosomes are what make all the proteins. They can either be free floating within the liquid portion of the cytoplasm, which is the area outside of the nucleus, or they can be attached to the endoplasmic reticulum. Now, the endoplasmic reticulum is composed of several different structures, and it gets lumped together as the endomembrane system. And it has the nuclear membrane, the endoplasmic reticulum, which is right here, the Golgi apparatus, which is a structure out here, lysosomes, which are these vacuoles here that are outside of there, other vacuoles, and also then the plasma membrane. Vacuoles are just open containers within a cell that are membrane bound. Notice that this endoplasmic reticulum has structures on it. The structure on that are called the ribosomes, and this is to be considered to be the rough endoplasmic reticulum because it actually has ribosomes on it. Now, the difference between a smooth endoplasmic reticulum and a rough endoplasmic reticulum is the presence of ribosomes on the surface of the endoplasmic reticulum. They're also different in what they actually do. Smooth ER synthesizes lipids, detoxifies drugs and poisons, stores calcium. The rough ER is for protein synthesis and distribution vesicles and form membranes. The Golgi apparatus is a flat membranous surface. Right here is an example of one that acts to modify proteins that come out of the endoplasmic reticulum. It also sorts things and sends them off to the surface of the cell where they can be excreted. Lysosomes are digestive compartments. They're responsible for digesting macromolecules, both internal and external macromolecules. Vacuoles, there's all kinds of them. There's storage vacuoles, contractile vacuoles, and in plants you have a central vacuole, which stores food, ions, pigments, and especially water. The mitochondria is a separate structure within the cell, and its responsibility is to produce energy. This is the energy production center of the cell. And it produces that energy as a molecule that we'll get to of ATP, adenosine triphosphate. Chloroplasts you find in plants. They are filled with chlorophyll. They're also membrane bound. And it is believed that both mitochondria and chlorophyll, because they have similarities to bacteria, was at one time were part bacteria that have been trapped by cells and evolutionary have become now mitochondria and chloroplasts. They also have their own DNA. They are covered in a double membrane and they have their own ribosomes and they grow and reproduce independent from the cell. Peroxisomes, these are cells which have hydrogen peroxide. In plants, they convert fats into sugars to allow the fats to be used for growth. The cytoskeleton, this is what keeps the cell in the right shape. You have three different kinds of cytoskeleton. You have intermediate fibers, microfilaments, and microtubules. Each has its own function within the cell. They provide movement of the cell itself and also the organelles within a cell. Here's a chart table for you to compare microtubules, microfilaments, and intermediate filaments on their structure, their size, what they're made up of, and what their functions are. Notice most of them provide some important parts for cell shape, but they have completely different types of protein. The extracellular space is outside of the cell on the exterior of the plasma membrane. And its most important thing is that it provides a place for where cells can communicate with their environment and also with other cells. There are junctions between cells. Plasmodesmata are openings between plant cells that allow materials like water and food to move between plant cells. There are things called tight junctions, which do not allow anything to move back and forth between those cells. There's desmata that will actually have areas where you can communicate between the cells, and gap junctions. These are also areas which open and close to allow things to move back and forth between cells. So that is a brief description of the cells. There's a lot more detail about that information in your textbook and also in the homework. You will be doing several experiments in the lab working on what cells are and looking at cells. Well, hopefully that was a nice little view of what the cell is. Have any questions, remember, please post them on the discussion. Have a good day, afternoon, or day, or evening, depending on where you're listening to this.